In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 6, we read, "And hath raised us up together, made us sit together in heavenly places, in Christ Jesus." In Revelation chapter 12, verse 1, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, upon her head a crown of 12 stars. For after this woman finally ascends from the earth to be joined again to her husband, she shall also be glorified with her husband, and afterward she shall be crowned Queen of Heaven." And finally, after their marriage is consummated in the heavens and the earth shall again be recreated as a paradise. We see that in Revelation chapter 21, verse 1. For such has been God's original intention from the beginning. Following the great renovation of this earth, the Lamb's bride is afterwards depicted as descending from heaven, described as a bride ordained for her husband. In Revelation chapter 21, verses 2 through 3, and verses 9, she is called that great city Jerusalem and declared to be the tabernacle of the Spirit of God, possessing the fullness and nature of God himself. Now, back to this constellation Cephas, we see that Cephas represents the glorious king who is seated upon his throne. Now, having his left foot upon the polar star, being ordained in a beautiful robe and wearing a glorious crown of stars, holding the royal scepter in his hand. According to Egyptians, his name is Pekua, which means this one comes to rule. So when we look back at the scriptures concerning the child who is to be born to the Queen of Heaven, we find that her child is also destined to rule over all nations. For in Revelation chapter 12, verse 5, we read, "And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne." This constellation Cephas in the zodiac of Madeira is also represented as resting upon a throne, so to speak. However, that throne is represented by the hind leg of a beast, most likely a cow. Some believe that this thigh represents the thigh of the constellation Ursa Major. In either case, Cephas is enthroned upon that thigh, which is to say, Cephas is enthroned upon whatever is represented as a cow's body having a disc and horns. It is interesting that the Queen of Heaven is also represented as the cow in Egypt. And this ties wonderfully together with our identification of the great bear with the glorified Queen of Heaven, the bride of Christ. The Egyptian Book of the Dead refers to this constellation as the thigh in the northern sky. The thigh was considered to be a special place of safety and protection, and the Egyptian scarab was often represented in connection with the transporting of souls to heaven as a solar vehicle transporting these souls to this heavenly place of safety and protection. Upon his right shoulder we have the star named El Duramin, which means the coming quickly, and within his girdle another star, El Pirate, means or gives the meaning of the Redeemer. The message of Cephas declares that not only will the promised Redeemer come forth as promised, but that his coming every day of our lives with the hope of his appearing. We should feel this at the very center of our souls, and this with true anticipation and expectation. For when he finally does return, all of the ancient prophecies concerning him shall also be fulfilled. The message has been proclaimed by means of the ancient myths and signs, as well as by the proclaimed gospel of Jesus Christ. All men will know of him, and every eye shall behold him. And as we have already indicated, the Cephas, who is represented here as a king of heaven, is that deliverer, as is represented within the constellation Perseus. It is not surprising, then, to discover that the star in his left knee is named El Rai, which means who breaks or who bruises. And in the scriptures, this deliverer must come forth to break the band that binds the children of Noah with the great monster Cetus. In Psalms chapter 107, verses 13 through 15, we read, and he saved them out of their distress. He brought them out of darkness, and the shadow of death brake their bands in sunder. Being advised by the oracle of God, he willingly offered up his beautiful daughter Andromeda in chains to the great sea monster Cetus, so that the rest of the kingdom might be spared from the wrath of Poseidon, the god of the sea. The very site of this event is said to have taken place at the city that is now known as Tel Aviv, a city located within modern Israel. Another deacon of Pisces is the constellation Andromeda. In the Egyptian zodiac of Dendera, she is represented as a woman being encircled off of the lower fish of the constellation Pisces. We believe who is the woman being glorified as the Queen of Heaven. In a more common representation, the constellation Andromeda is represented as a beautiful virgin who has been hopelessly bound, both hands and feet, to the rock, to be offered up as a sacrifice to the great sea monster Cetus. The names of the stars within this marvelous constellation seem to accurately describe this unfortunate condition she finds herself in. Among these stars are Mara, which is in the woman's body, and Mara, which means the weak and the afflicted. These wounds echo the prophetic words spoken to Abram in the day when the Lord made a covenant with Abram concerning this. In Psalm chapter 68, verse 6, we read, He bringeth out those which are bound with chains. This cruel master has made our lives extremely bitter with hard bondage, as in Exodus chapter 1, verse 14. Taskmasters, or evil spirits, if you will, have been set over the sons of Adam to afflict them with their burdens. Compare with Exodus chapter 1, verse 11. As with Israel of old, the hardships continue to become increasingly worse. The children of Israel began to sigh, crying out to their God by reason of their great bondage. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 23, the good news of gospel messages that God has heard their continual groaning. See Exodus chapter 2, verse 24. And as the scriptures declare, God has remembered his covenant with Abraham. At the time God appeared to Moses, he called him out of the world for a specific purpose. God did not call Moses out to gain worldwide fame or riches. He called Moses out to deliver his people from the cruel bondage of Egypt. He reminded Moses of their great sufferings and showed that God himself had witnessed the great affliction of his people, for he had repeatedly heard their cries. Moses was chosen primarily to deliver the seed of Abraham from out of the hand of the Egyptian king, and afterwards he was to bring them into a good and large land, said to be flowing with prosperity. Compare with Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. God had first revealed to Moses. Afterwards he instructed Moses concerning his covenant, which he had previously made with all of Israel through their father Abraham. For God had informed Moses of how he was now appearing before him as a result of him remembering the covenant which he had entered into with their father Abraham. It was because of the great covenant and for no other reason that God had now promised to bring forth the children of Israel up out of the burden of their bondage. Besides their freedom from bondage, children of Israel would now be set apart from all other peoples of the world, to be considered as his special chosen people. God would now begin to show himself strong on their behalf, for it was now time to manifest himself to them and to become a God to them, as he had also previously been to their father Abraham. He does so in Exodus chapter 6, verse 1 through 8. The Egyptian bondage is a type of satanic bondage that all the peoples of this earth have been born into. The true enemy of God's children has afflicted and affected man in all three areas of his life. Satan has been able to dominate his very soul, which consists of both his mind and his emotions, and he has succeeded in enslaving their bodies, and even their very spirits are under his dominion. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 3, we read, "Even so, when we were children, we were in bondage under the elements of this world." The scriptures show that the extent of Satan's own power and influence over the inhabitants of this earth are tremendous. The power of his influence in man's bondage is such that Satan is easily able to bind the back of a woman with a spirit of infirmity for 18 years of her life. In Luke chapter 13, verse 11, we are told the story. This woman's deliverance might only be effected by the hand of Almighty God himself. When that woman had finally come into contact with Jesus, he stretched out his hand to heal her, on the basis that she had been a daughter of Abraham. She had a God-given right to be set free. God was bound to himself by the Abrahamic covenant to set her free. She had been born a child of Abraham. It is because God had a covenant with Abraham to be a God to him and to his children. And God is also bound by his own words to be a God to her. She need only to call upon him in faith, standing merely upon the basis of that covenant alone, for she has a legal and God-given right to be set free. The plain, simple, unadulterated gospel is this: redemption has been made available in and through the new covenant, but for all of them who are born into the kingdom of darkness, this is true. The only legal requirement is that the children must receive this adoption of sons, which is written in Galatians chapter 4, verse 5. This adoption is a right. In itself, it's merely a ratification of a blood covenant of Abraham, and that they must have faith in the power of that covenant, whereby they must be delivered. For in Romans chapter 8, verse 15 through 17, we read, "For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, and heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we might also be glorified with him." Other stars that we find within this constellation are named El Amah, which is located in the left foot, and El Paras, the brightest star, being located in the woman's head, which mean to be struck down and broken down. And in Hebrew, the woman represented within this constellation is called Sirah and Persea, meaning chained and stretched out. Then there are these stars Adil and Elmira, both of which mean the afflicted, and Mitzar, which means the weak. It is to this woman, as well as to all born of a woman, that Jesus Christ speaks his memorial words of hope concerning that acceptable year of the Lord in Luke chapter 4, verse 18 to 19, where we'll read, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, the recovering of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty them that are bruised, and to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." The woman in the constellation is named Andromeda, whose name means man ruler.